Good evening. Welcome to our seminar. Good evening to you. What to do when there are no medicines. Surviving a disaster when standard medical options are not available. By the way, all of these subjects relate to that first subject because if you want to survive a disaster, you got to be healthy, right? And if standard medical options are not available, you got to have alternatives. It's probably a good idea to have alternatives anyway, but all right, our subject tonight is diabetes, the underlying cause.
Hi.
Hi.
Remember what I'm
Before
here for?
we do that, though, we are going to do some
Gifts.
and surprises and thank yous.
Yes. And so we'd like to start with a special thank you to Jennifer. You guys, she's way up there. And Ken, who I do not see yet. Is he like
He's probably at home watching.
You're all alone. So
I've been here all week all alone.
Aw.
I'll take it up to her.
So if you want to choose, I was going to send two of them up there. I don't know if he's coming, and you can choose which one. These are by Pampelona Rogers. These are amazing. Plants that heal, foods that heal. These are really nice.
You're away from the mic now.
Oh, well. And Fred and Saya donated those. So, and so now what we want to do is how many people here? How many people here have been here all 7 nights? Wow, that's a lot of you.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 at least, yes.
6. Okay, so what I have here, oh, don't go away, Fred. I should have waited till you sat down. So I want you, you can choose one of these balance magazines. You can choose one of these balance magazines, and they're really nice magazines. Who's here for the first time tonight? I don't think we have anybody here for the first time tonight. Okay. So who else didn't get something?
Yeah, has anybody been here and not gotten something?
I don't think these two over here have gotten anything.
Oh, she hasn't gotten something.
Oh, well, what is wrong with us? Okay, so, what do
Go, give her one of these, maybe.
okay,
Or
yeah,
not this.
okay.
Or,
So,
well,
who has never gotten anything?
Robin.
Robin, you haven't gotten anything? What's wrong with us? We're gonna give you 2 things then.
Here, give her a choice. Give her a choice between that one or this one.
Okay, yeah, or
This one might be a better one. Do you want?
these are, this you can't go wrong with. Okay.
Anybody want one?
Anybody else didn't get anything? Okay, so then let me ask, I'll just ask this way. Who has never got, who doesn't have this book? Health and Wellness, Secrets That Will Change Your Life. Okay, so I only
Here's another one.
a more, oh, okay.
Here's another one.
Okay, you want to share? I don't like it when people share, but you don't have to share. I think you might have, except Kyle, you want to, and it'll be,
And I can't.
we'll share. Did Kyle get a balance? Did you get a balance, Kyle?
We don't.
Maybe Kyle wants.
Okay.
He's been here every night. He wants one. Yeah, sorry. Didn't mean to neglect you.
All right, I'm going to ask one more question here.
I don't know if you guys are.
This one's a hard one because I'm guessing most people will not be able to raise their hand. At least that's my hope. So is there anybody here who feels like they have already gotten rid of all the excitotoxins out of their house to the best of their ability? Yes? All right.
Who's that? Was that you, Tim?
Give it to the food bank. Or, I know. I'm sure what's already there has got the same stuff in it, though. Unfortunately. All right, well, that's good. That's a great accomplishment, by the way, Robin. That's a great accomplishment, by the way. You really implemented that fast, and, you know, that's the way to do it. I know the rest of you are still planning to do it, and I know it takes some time, because you got to go shopping, but, all right. We're going to try to discover the underlying cause of diabetes. You think the underlying cause of diabetes is in that picture?
It's a possibility, I think.
So, if you were just to make a knee-jerk statement of what you think, or what maybe most people think is the underlying cause of diabetes, what do you think it would be? Sugar, right? Sugar is what they'll say. So exercise does have something to do with it. But let's have a look and let's actually see what the scientific data says. Because if you go to the doctor, he'll tell you what? Go on a low-carb diet, right? That's what he'll tell you. He'll probably even tell you not to eat fruit. Can you believe that?
Yes, I believe it.
All right, let's have a look. So first of all, let's define what diabetes is. Diabetes is an abnormal glucose level. At least it's diagnosed that way, okay? So a normal glucose level is considered to be a fasting level below 100, okay? We can measure it fasting, which means before breakfast in the morning, before you've eaten, or postprandial, meaning after the meal. And if you are considered normal, you're below 125 for after the meal. Below 100 fasting, below 125 after the meal. So you can see that your blood sugar does go up even if you're normal, right? It just shouldn't shoot up too far. Now, something between 100 and 125 for fasting is considered prediabetes, and above 126 is a diagnosis of diabetes. And if you're testing it after the meal, between 140 and 199 would be considered prediabetes, and after the meal, above 200 would be considered or diagnosed as diabetes. Yes?
Is that 2 hours after the meal or immediately after the meal?
What's the standard for that? I think it's 30 minutes, if I remember right.
Well, usually it's just, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah,
It's gonna be different based
30. I think it's about 30 to 60 minutes. It goes in a curve, so
It could be maybe
yeah, it's pretty quick after. Not necessarily 2 hours.
After only 2 hours, that's why I was wondering, just interested in.
2 hours, I would think it would be already dropping.
It should.
Should be. Maybe not for somebody who's diabetic, but it should be already dropping by 2 hours. So.
Okay, thank you.
All right, now we'll talk about type 1 versus type 2 diabetes because these two diseases are totally different diseases. They have all the same symptoms. People die of the same complications from both diseases, but they're two totally different diseases. Type 1 diabetes accounts for only about 5% of diabetics, so there's not very many in comparison to type 2. And that's fortunate because that's more serious and more difficult to reverse. There is some evidence that a few people have reversed it, but I saw a published article actually where apparently they reversed this one kid's diabetes shortly after diagnosis. I'm guessing it's not going to be reversed later in life. And if it can be reversed, we don't yet know exactly how to do that. But we do know how to help mitigate the symptoms and help reduce the blood sugars, even in type 1. So type 2 is 95% of diabetics, and that's the easier one to reverse. But as I mentioned, they're two different diseases. In type 1, you have no insulin production, or way too little. Way too little. There might be maybe a little, but usually there's pretty much none. And that usually happens because the beta cells on the pancreas which produce insulin have been destroyed. And we'll talk about how that happens in a little bit. In type 2 diabetes, I think I have a slide for that anyway. In type 2 diabetes, there's too much insulin. If you measure the insulin, which you can do, there's a lab test to measure insulin. They usually don't use it. I mean, it's common to measure the sugar, not the insulin, but you can measure the insulin. And a type 2 diabetic generally has more insulin than a normal person. And you might be thinking, what? How is that possible? Well, that's because the body knows that the sugar is too high. It's madly pumping out the insulin, trying to get the sugars down, but the insulin is not working. We call that reduced insulin sensitivity. It's not really the insulin that's insensitive, it's the cells that are insensitive to the insulin, as we'll see in a minute. So your insulin acts like a little delivery boy. And the delivery boy is supposed to, maybe he's working for DoorDash or something like that, and he's supposed to take the food to the house. Okay, that's what insulin is, the delivery boy. So with type 1 diabetes, there's just nobody to hire. There's no delivery boys on the streets. They can't find anybody to work for them, okay? Type 2 diabetes, the streets are jammed with delivery boys. But they're having trouble. The reason why there's causing a traffic jam is because they're madly trying to get the orders to the house, which is the cell, right? To the person inside the house who's starving to death, but they're not able to get the door open. And so they just keep piling up on the highways. What are the highways? The blood vessels. That's why. And so there's a whole bunch of blood vessels, there's a whole bunch of insulin, delivery boys, in the blood vessels, but there's also a bunch of what? Sugar. That's the food that they're carrying in their car, right? So the sugar just keeps piling up in the bloodstream. That's why we measure a high blood sugar, because the blood sugar is backed up in the bloodstream because it can't get to the cell. So the cells are dying in the midst of plenty. So what causes diabetes? Again, is it in the picture? It is in the picture, but it may not be what you think. Let's have a look. This is what you will see a standard thing online if you look up diabetes and you look up the effect of different nutrients, macronutrients on the blood. You will be hard-pressed to find anything other than something that looks like this. This is just the standard way of viewing it, okay? Now, if you were to look at that, what would you say would be the thing you need to avoid? Carbohydrates, right? Because it's making your sugar go high. The problem is that's completely false. It's based on a false premise. It's based on a false premise that came from something called, glycemic index, thanks. That's the word I was trying to think of. It comes from a false premise that comes from the glycemic. Has anybody heard of the glycemic index? Yeah, so the doctors will tell you about the glycemic index, and they have all these different charts on how to figure out what's high glycemic index. The problem is that they tested individual foods on people who were already diabetic. And they tested just one food, and sure enough, the ones that gave the highest spikes were the carbs. And so they say, avoid all those. But we're going to see something very different when we start to look at the science. Let's go to this China study. This is in the China study book, but this particular study that he's presenting here is previously published data. It's not part of the China study data. So this was diets and diabetes around 1925. Imagine, we've known this since 1925 or earlier. Look at this. They compared various different countries of diets. You see the dark bars are the amount of carbohydrates eaten, the light bars are the amount of fats eaten, and the line with the little diamonds is the rates of diabetes. Notice that the more carbohydrates you eat, the less the rates of diabetes. Let me say that again. The more carbohydrates you eat, the less the rates of diabetes. Japan eats the most carbohydrates, and they have the least diabetes. So that means that carbohydrates cannot be the cause of diabetes. Is that right? What would be more likely the cause according to that study? The fat. As the fat goes up, the diabetes goes up. So the diabetes and the fat are correlated, but the diabetes and the carbohydrates have an inverse relationship. Well, we're going to see more evidence than this. In 1929, Dr. J. Shirley Sweeney took healthy medical students. They got to be guinea pigs. He was able to create diabetes in only a few days by putting them on a high-fat diet. Listen to what he says. If you want a quick case of diabetes, just eliminate the carbohydrates from your diet. Did you hear what I just read? If you want a quick case of diabetes, just eliminate the carbohydrates from the diet for a couple of days, then take the test. It will demonstrate diabetes. If you eliminate carbs, you will either guarantee that you get diabetes or that you stay diabetic. So I don't know if they're trying to get residual income or what. Well, your average doctor probably doesn't even know that, but somebody knows that. Right? And somebody is not really informing people about it. They're just treating diabetes and making lots of money at it. Let's have a look at more evidence. In 1935, Dr. Harold Hemsworth. He demonstrated with controlled experiments that insulin sensitivity is decreased by increasing the fat in the diet. That means if you decrease the sensitivity of the insulin, that means it's not working as good, right? And as I said earlier, it's not really the insulin that's getting less sensitive, it's the cells are getting less sensitive to the insulin. We'll figure out why in a minute. He found that blood sugar levels went up as fat intake went up, and more insulin was needed for people eating high-fat diets. Also in the 1930s, Dr. Israel Rabinovich did a 5-year study. He took 100 diabetics. He put them on a 20% fat diet. It's not too aggressive, but it's better than the average American diet. And it resulted in 24%. That's not a majority, but that's a good number. 24% of the diabetics were able to get off their insulin and have normal glucose levels in just a few weeks. Here's what he says. I believe that in the data presented here, there is incontestable evidence that the high carbohydrate, low calorie diet is more effective in controlling diabetes than all other methods of treatment reported hitherto. That's a pretty astonishing statement, wouldn't you say? All right, let's get a little bit more aggressive. 1979, Dr. James Anderson again gets some medical students to be guinea pigs for him. He gives them 1 pound of refined sugar per day with no added fat. He terminates the study after 11 weeks. He could not get a single diabetic from those healthy medical students. Their blood sugars didn't raise. Why? Because the body just made more insulin to deal with the extra sugar. Now, I don't recommend that diet. You're going to have all kinds of other problems down the road if you keep that kind of a thing up. Even 11 weeks is way too much for that diet. No diabetes. Then he did a crossover study where he took them off all that sugar and he put them on a 65% fat diet. And in 2 weeks, 72% of the men had elevated glucose levels that could qualify as diabetic. 72% in 2 weeks. He could create diabetes in young college students in 2 weeks. Do you remember how much fat is in an average potato chip? 65%. Do you remember how much fat is in a beef burger? 65%. Might have been 68%. So a burger is a perfect way to prepare yourself to get diabetes. All right, so let's do a little bit more with Dr. Anderson. He then goes to real diabetics. Instead of creating diabetics who've never been diabetic before and probably won't be for a number of years or decades, he's going to take people who already actually have the disease, and this is what he does. He places type 1 and type 2 diabetics on a, listen carefully, high fiber, high carbohydrate, low fat diet consisting mostly of whole plant foods, and within 3 weeks, the type 1 diabetics were able to lower their insulin by an average of 40%, the type 1 diabetics. Now that is really revolutionary for type 1 diabetics. Even if you can't reverse the type 1 diabetes totally, to drop your insulin by 40% is very important because that's going to ensure less weight gain, because the more insulin you have, the more weight you gain, the more weight you gain, the more insulin you make, etc., and the more diabetic you get. It's also going to mitigate the symptoms of the high sugars. They also drop their cholesterol levels by 30%, which is totally standard. We see that all the time with our patients. Dropping 30% in 3 weeks is what we expect. All right, listen to this. This is the real bombshell. 96% of the type 2 diabetics were able to discontinue their insulin in a matter of weeks. How many? 96%. We just looked at a study where he accomplished 24% getting off, right? This is 96%. That's almost everybody. Yes.
We know there's a tremendous difference between complex carbohydrates and.
Yes.
Is that coming up in your talk, the difference?
Yeah, we will address that. We're not talking about eating a whole bunch of simple carbohydrates, piles and piles of sugar. We're not talking about going to the fair and eating cotton candy or sucking on a lollipop.
The fact is, in those studies, they were eating sugar.
That's right. Yeah, in the study, at least with the medical students, he gave them 1 pound of sugar a day. 1 pound of sugar a day.
But that's not what he was doing there.
So,
Did he go to their funerals?
no, we don't want to eat sugar out of control like that, obviously, but we can see from the data that sugar is not the underlying cause of diabetes. Is that clear?
Yes.
The cause of diabetes is fat, and it's actually turns out to be mostly animal fat, which we're going to also find out in a little bit too. Karen O'Day from the University of Melbourne takes 11 native diabetic men of Australia back to the outback. She says, these are city guys now. She says, I want you to go back to your birth village, and I want you to start living like you used to live. In the hut or in hunt and gather food like you used to live in the outback. And the diabetes disappeared in 7 of the 11 men in 5 weeks. Now that's not 96%. And of course, she wasn't telling them to eat plant foods either, necessarily. She just said, do what you used to do. So they were going to be getting more exercise, obviously. And they were eating kangaroos, which that's what they eat. Kangaroos are interesting in that they're very low fat. They're a very low fat meat. I don't recommend eating it because we already talked about on Sabbath about the clean and unclean meats, and a kangaroo happens to be a rodent. So that wouldn't be a biblical choice for diet, but for diabetes it was helpful because it was low fat. You can have other issues eating kangaroos, but some people actually say that kangaroo meat is so low in fat that there are some major fast food chains that add kangaroo meat to their beef burgers without putting it on the label. I don't know if we can prove that, but I wouldn't be surprised given many of the other things that we see happening in our world as far as corruption. All right, here is the actual data that shows what was happening to their insulin or their blood sugars. You can see here the control group and the experimental group, they start out both together at just under 30 units of insulin a day. And in essentially 3 weeks, just over 18 days, in essentially 3 weeks, you can see that your type 1 diabetics have dropped by 40%. They're probably not going to drop all the way. They'll probably still need some insulin because their pancreas isn't making any insulin. And your type 2 diabetics have dropped down to, what is that, 3 or 4 units in 3 weeks. Essentially, if you're down to 3 or 4 units, you can probably get off it. Here is the rate of type 2 diabetes as it relates to meat eating. I showed you this slide on another night. Notice the people who ate meat 1 or less days per week. I wish they would have done this with people who just never eat meat. I think that would get rid of some static. But anyway, this was people who ate meat less than once a week. Who does that? I guess there's probably some people who just maybe occasionally, very occasionally eat some when they go out to eat or something like that. I don't know. So, and then they had a relative risk of 1, and the ones who ate it 1 to 5 days per week had a relative risk of 1.4. That's a 40% increase. And 1 to 5 days a week is actually a pretty big stretch. That's a big difference if somebody's eating meat once a week versus eating 5 times a week, right? So obviously the ones who are eating it once a week are drawing that number down. The ones who are eating it 6 or more days a week, in other words, multiple times per day, had a relative risk of 3.8. That's almost 400% increase in risk for diabetes if you're eating meat all the time versus not eating meat. Is that serious? Does that tell you a very powerful correlation? So we already found out that the underlying cause of diabetes is fat. And now we're seeing that it's probably meat, because we already saw in previous lectures that the animal products are the ones with the highest fat, right? That's where most of the fat is. You had a question?
My question is reference to animal byproducts such as eggs.
Yeah, the question is regarding other animal products such as eggs. And I don't have a specific study to show you correlating diabetes with eggs. But I do know that lacto-ovo-vegetarians get diabetes at a much higher rate than total vegetarians. So whether that's the eggs or the milk or both, we know that the eggs are animal protein. Eggs are not super high fat in comparison to other animal products. So they may be a lesser influence than the milk, probably. I would guess. Now, I think my explanation for part of this issue with diabetes is in another lecture. I just realized. So I'm going to just tell you this off the top of my head right now because I don't think I have a slide for it. So what is happening with type 2 diabetes is essentially your cells. It's like the cells have a door, and insulin is the thing that the delivery boy that can unlock the door. He's got a special key because the person inside is in a wheelchair, can't come to the door. So he's got a special key to unlock the door, but the key is not working because the door is clogged, covered completely with fat. You can't even find the lock because it's all smeared, covered with fat. So when you start going on to a lower fat diet, especially the animal fat, what happens is the body starts to dissolve the fat that's clogging all those doors. And it starts to go back into the bloodstream and be eliminated, and the doors start to clean up. And pretty soon the locks are visible, and so some of the delivery boys start being able to get the insulin inside. Okay, and so the sugar starts coming down. So you're starting to allow the insulin sensitivity to take over. It's starting to do its job, and your own insulin starts working. And that starts happening in just a matter of weeks. Now, so let me talk a little bit about the glycemic index again, because I want to tell you a little bit more detail on that. So the glycemic index, as I mentioned, is just testing a diabetic who's already diabetic on one food. So if you give a diabetic a meal of just potatoes, what do you think their blood sugar is going to do? It's going to spike, of course. So in a medical system that tends to just focus on treating symptoms, blood sugar is a symptom, right? So, symptom. Let's bring that down. How do we bring that down? Feed them lots of fat and protein. But that's treating the symptom, and that's actually perpetuating the problem. It's not treating the underlying cause. So now that we know the underlying cause, how would we do this? Reduce the fat. So think about a potato now. It's quiz time. How much fat by percentage of calories is in a potato? 1%. Is that a whole lot lower than 65%, where Dr. Anderson was creating diabetics in 2 weeks? So here's the thing. This is the problem with the glycemic index. It's built on a false premise. The false premise is we're worried about the symptom. So we'll test a diabetic and see what shoots their blood sugar up the quickest. If you put a diabetic on a fast of just potatoes and nothing else for 3 weeks, their blood sugar would come down so fast their head would spin. Why? Because they just went on a super low-fat diet, 1%. That's like more extreme than any of the data that I just presented you, a 1% fat diet. So putting them on a potato fast would actually result in completely reversing the disease process. Isn't that amazing? But people say, oh, the doctor says, no, don't eat the potato. Because why? Because it'll spike your sugar. Of course it'll spike your sugar. If you're already a diabetic and you've been eating a standard diet all along, and we give you a potato, yeah, it's going to spike your sugar. But treating that spike is treating the symptom, not the underlying cause. So guess what we do to our diabetics at the health retreat? We put them on a 2-day fast at the beginning that's just whole fruits and whole vegetables. Can you imagine that? They're diabetics and they're like, what? I'm going to eat only fruit? Fruit and vegetables? We're like, yeah. And do you know what happens to their blood sugar? It spikes at first. And we tell them that. It's going to spike. Don't worry about it. And then what happens? Comes down. Because fruits and vegetables are really low in fat. So we're treating the underlying cause, not the symptom. So that's how. So basically, I don't really put any stock in the glycemic index at all. I think it's completely useless as a clinical tool. It gives the complete wrong idea. If you go by the glycemic index, you would not eat any potatoes or any grains or any fruits, and it would pretty much guarantee that your intake of protein and fat is going to go way through the roof because there's nothing else to eat. And so it's a clinical tool that goes along with the standard paradigm. But the standard paradigm is not borne up through inspiration or through the best scientific studies available, like the China study. Dr. T. Colin Campbell says the following, there is a mountain of scientific evidence to show that the healthiest diet you can possibly consume is a high carbohydrate diet. A high carbohydrate diet. This low carb thing is causing people lots of problems. Lots of problems. Every traditional culture in the world that doesn't have Western diseases bases their entire culinary culture on a carbohydrate. Quinoa in Peru, right? That's all they eat. 3 times a day they eat quinoa. Bolivia also. Corn in Africa, cassava, rice, potatoes, sweet potatoes. Those are all good foods that God made for us. You see, a lot of the diets today are actually based on a world paradigm. And some of the fad diets are very clearly based on an evolutionary paradigm. From a biblical perspective, we want to eat how the Bible says, right? We go back to Genesis and we see what was the manufacturer recommended diet for our food. And that was fruits, grains, nuts, and vegetables. And what are we going to eat in heaven? Fruits, grains, nuts, and vegetables. We should be preparing for that. The eating of meat was a temporary thing that was only to save people's lives right after the flood. And God warned them that it was going to kill them if they kept it up. But they kept it up, and guess what it did? It killed them. And so that's a biblical paradigm. So from a biblical paradigm, we are made in the image of God, and God is the one who determined what was best for us to put in our bodies. From an evolutionary paradigm, your ancestor is not God, your ancestor is a monkey, right? So you go and you look how a monkey would eat. A monkey is going to eat fruits. They're going to eat vegetables. They're only going to eat fruits when they're in season, though, right? So half the year they're not going to have fruits, probably, depending on where they live. And they're going to eat some vegetables, and they're going to eat meat. Monkeys kill animals for food on a regular basis. Most people don't know that. And they'll scavenge also off if they find another kill from someone else. And so what's a monkey never going to eat? Grains. Grains or bread. I mean, unless a human feeds it to them, they're never going to eat that, right? Because grains are too difficult for a monkey to harvest. A monkey isn't going to harvest grains. So when you look at diets like the paleo diet, it's named after evolutionary theory, right? Paleo. You look at the Atkins diet, all these are based on an evolutionary paradigm. And so we should think about these kinds of diets and think about the implications of a whole world view that's behind the diet. And that can help us sort through the maze of conflicting, supposedly scientific evidence. All right, here's a journal that we looked at last night when we talked about weight loss, Diabetologia, the European Journal of Diabetes. And we talked about Hanna Kaliova. And I showed you a bunch of different things that related to weight loss. Now we're going to show you a couple of her findings relating to glucose. This is amazing. Look at this. These people are all getting the same food, same amount of food, but it's either being divided into 6 meals a day or 2 meals a day. And look at the ones. They all increase their sensitivity because they're now being put on a healthy diet. The researchers are giving them the food that they're eating, right? So they're not on a standard American diet anymore. So they're all improving their insulin sensitivity. But who improves the insulin sensitivity the most? The 2 meals a day. They go way higher, like double, more than double. Now what about the hemoglobin A1C? They both improve their hemoglobin A1C because they're both on healthy diet right now. But look who improves it more. The ones who are on 2 meals a day drop more than the ones who are on 6 meals a day. Here's the fasting plasma glucose. They both drop their insulin or their glucose levels, but the ones on 2 meals a day drop the glucose more than the ones on 6 meals a day. If you want to be a little proactive, maybe if your doctor tells you to eat 6 meals a day, ask him if there's any science that actually shows that that's valuable. I don't think there is. I mean, maybe somebody is, there's science falsely called too, so I suppose there's somebody who's come up with something that, they say figures can lie and liars can figure, right? The C-peptide, which is an important level for diabetics, also shows level of inflammation. dropped way more, 3 times the amount in the people eating 2 meals a day versus the ones eating 6 meals a day. So over and over and over again, we can see all the evidence points to eating less number of meals per day to control weight, to control diabetes, to be less hungry, to have your blood sugars better. All across the board, there's a lot of health benefits from eating less often. When you eat frequently, you exhaust your stomach. And very many people mistake exhaustion of their stomach for hunger. Or they mistake thirst for hunger, because dehydration can make you feel hungry too. We saw these slides the other day also, but I want you to look at them again because this is important. These are the foods without fiber, which are generally animal products. You can get some plant products that have very little fiber if they're very highly processed. But all plants have fiber in them if they're whole. And no animal product has fiber in it unless it's the contents of the intestine. Yeah. Notice how all of these foods without fiber are very high in fat. Very high in fat. Beef, there it is. I said 65, it's 68% for the beef. 68%, that's more than what Dr. Anderson was feeding to the medical students to give them diabetes. 72% of them, that's 3/4, got diabetes in 2 weeks on that kind of a diet. And that's almost what your chips are at. Your chips are at 61%. Now, here are the foods with fiber, and look how low they are in comparison. So not only are you, when you eat foods with fiber, not only are you getting the benefit of the fiber, and you're getting no cholesterol, like you would in the animal products or the foods without fiber, but you're also getting much, much, much lower fat. And fat is the underlying cause of diabetes, as we just discovered. Now, this warrants a little bit of a look at types of fat. And I kind of touched on this off the top of my head, but I'll show you the slides now. So there's saturated fats and unsaturated fats. Unsaturated fats are divided into mono and polyunsaturated fats. Then you have your hydrogenated fats or trans fats, and those are your unsaturated fats that have been hydrogenated. And I'll tell you what hydrogenation means in a moment. And then you have your omega-3 fatty acids and your omega-6 fatty acids. So those are basically what we're going to talk about. That's just an outline. So your saturated fats are pretty much oils that are hard or thick at room temperature. This would be butter, lard, Crisco. Well, Crisco is hydrogenated, so we'll talk about that in a moment. Meat drippings, marbling in the meat. These things increase storability, and that's why the industry likes them. They're more interested in shelf life than they are in your life. And this is the kind of thing which allows them to give advertisements like it melts in your mouth and not in your hand, right? Because it can take a higher temperature before it melts. The problem in general with saturated fats are increased heart and vessel disease. Now, we will show you a couple fats that are a little higher for vegetable fats in saturated fats. And I'm guessing we would want to be a little careful with vegetable fats that are high in saturated fats. But I'm guessing also that they are not the same as saturated animal fats. Well, we know at least one important difference is that there are antioxidants in saturated vegetable fats, which there are no antioxidants in animal fats. So that one right there is probably a significant one, and I'm sure there's others, but I haven't seen a study comparing saturated animal fats with saturated plant fats. So, okay, I already mentioned that saturated fats from animals has no antioxidants. All right, so then we could have remember I told you the joke at my wife's relatives' table where they would say pass the cancer or pass the heart disease? Yeah. So the heart disease was supposed to be the butter, and the cancer was supposed to be the margarine. So margarine is a hydrogenated fat. And the problem with that is you're basically saturating it. They're taking an unsaturated fat and saturating it. What does it mean to hydrogenate it? Well, this is a typical saturated fat. It's butyric acid would be a saturated fat. They're generally short chains, and those are the animal fats. Your plant fats are long chains, but when they call them unsaturated, it means that they're not fully connected to hydrogen atoms. If you remember all the way back to high school chemistry, you might remember that a carbon atom is supposed to have 4 points where it can bind with something else, 4 binding sites, right? Oxygen molecule has 2 binding sites, and a hydrogen molecule has 1 binding site. So if you notice there that that's a chain of carbon atoms there, and there's a double bond right there in the middle, which means there's no hydrogen that can sit there. That is an unsaturated fat. It means it's unsaturated with hydrogen. Okay? So hydrogenation means what? You're now going to saturate it. You're going to break that double bond, and you're going to put a hydrogen molecule there. And they do this with a mechanical process where they shoot the oil very fast at high speed through a lot of pipes with a lot of corners. And that breaks up those double bonds, and they have hydrogen that's being injected into the oil at the same time, and so the hydrogen automatically picks up those bonds as they break. And so that's a monounsaturated fat because it has 1 double bond, 1 place where you could put a hydrogen molecule. A polyunsaturated fat has multiple double bonds where you could put multiple hydrogen atoms. Is that clear? It's a pretty simple explanation of it. And the problem is that the more unsaturated a fat is, so there's 2 problems here. Obviously, when you're hydrogenating a fat, you're saturating an unsaturated fat. So you may as well eat the butter. Well, not really, but you just don't want to eat hydrogenated fats. So your favorite little thing, what is it? Heart balance or? Earth balance, yeah, smart balance. Yeah, that's probably saturated fat, hydrogenated fat. Because they're trying to get it. The reason why they do this is to make it solid at room temperature. Okay, that's why they do it. Now, so essentially, if you look at it like this, your unsaturated fats are your good fats, your saturated fats in general are your bad fats. But there's also problems with some unsaturated fats. And it has to do with oxidation. Now, oxidation is this right here, right? When an apple starts turning brown, that's oxidation. When your car starts getting a rust spot on it, that's oxidation. When you burn oak in your firewood, in your fireplace, what is that? That's oxidation. Yeah. A combustion reaction is an oxidation reaction. And what happens is, if you oxidize a fat, it becomes very carcinogenic. And the problem is the more unsaturated, the more polyunsaturated a fat is, the more easily it has extra places, double bonds, where it could break it open. And what's going to attach there if it's not going through pipes at high speed in an industrial process? What's it going to reach? Oxygen. So it's going to bind with oxygen, and that fat now has become oxidized. Oxidized fat is what we call rancidity. Have you ever tasted a really terrible, strong taste or smell on nuts that have been around too long? Yeah? Do not eat those. Throw them away. That is rancid fat. That is oxidized fat. It's very carcinogenic. You don't want it. So if we look at this chart right here, your polyunsaturated fats are the ones that can oxidize the most easily. Now, if you can you think of something that it's very common for us to use that is very easily goes rancid? What would be at the top of the list? Can anybody think of one? Peanuts. Peanuts, yeah, they'll go rancid. They're probably not super easy rancid. I'm thinking of something else. Oils, any oil can go rancid. What about flaxseed? Have you ever noticed how flax can go rancid super, super easy? I mean, well, maybe if you didn't notice it, maybe you're not eating much flax, but you grind it when you're ready. Okay, good. When it's in the seed as God made it, He's packed it in there with antioxidants. So it doesn't go rancid in the seed. You can save the seed for a long time without it going rancid. But if you grind it, now what have you done? You've exposed the oils to oxygen. And now they can go rancid very rapidly. So the oil in a flaxseed is mostly polyunsaturated. That's what allows it to go rancid so easily. So look at this. This here shows that our green is monounsaturated, our blue is polyunsaturated, and our orange, yellow, whatever that color is saturated. So which is the best fat? You can just pick it out just by looking at it. Which is the best one to use? Olive and safflower look like the best ones, right? Olive and safflower. But let's talk about the safflower for a second. Have you ever seen extra virgin first cold pressed safflower oil? No, which means they heated it to get the oil out. Which means, remember, when they heat it, if they go from 40 degrees Fahrenheit to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, the rate of a chemical reaction doubles every 10 degrees Celsius. So going from 40 to 400 increases the rate of oxidation by 1,000,000 times. Okay? So if they're heating it to get it out, they're making it go oxidized. So that means you kick out the safflower. So your olive oil is the only one left that you really want to eat. And there's another reason why you want to eat olive oil, because the cold pressed extra virgin olive oil, number one, it hasn't been heated before, and number two, it actually can be heated for about 2 hours to 400 degrees before it starts oxidizing because of the antioxidants in it. Olive oil has more antioxidants than any other processed oil still left, even though it's processed. There's piles of antioxidants still in it. And that's why it doesn't go rancid very easily. Yes?
So is all extra virgin olive oil?
They normally say extra virgin first cold pressed. I've never seen one that says cold pressed that doesn't say extra virgin, or vice versa, so I'm not sure on that.
I buy extra virgin and I looked at them last night.
They didn't say cold pressed?
They did say.
Oh, they did
but
say.
I hadn't
Yeah.
noticed
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just a big, long, fancy name for the same thing. I don't know if there's extra virgin as one definition and cold pressed as another. I'd have to look that up. It's a good question. So oxidized oils create free radicals. Free radicals cause aging, inflammation, cancer, liver disorders, and arteriosclerosis or atherosclerosis. The more unsaturated the fat, the more easily it's oxidized. That's why the polyunsaturated aren't the best. Now, if you're eating if you're eating these foods as God made them, without extracting the oil, let's say sesame seeds, for example. Sesame seeds, that's a good food as God made it. You don't have to think you have to avoid sesame oil because it has lots of polyunsaturated. You just want to be real careful with processed, extracted sesame oil. And how would you do that? Well, one, you're not going to eat it all the time as your everyday oil. You probably don't want to, because sesame oil has a very strong flavor. It's usually used as a flavoring more than anything else. But number two, you would keep it in the fridge. That cold temperature keeps it from oxidizing. It reduces the rate of oxidation by 1,000,000 times compared to heating it. So, when most fats are heated to 330 degrees for 2 hours, they cause ailments and cardiovascular lesions in experimental animals. Just that processing. So So the problem is they extract the oil, let's say sunflower seeds, and they heat the sunflower seeds to 400 degrees for over 2 hours. So basically from the time you buy it, your sunflower seed oil is already able to produce serious ailments and lesions in animals. And then what do you do with it? You heat it again, right? To what temperature? Well, you might be heating it more than 400. You shouldn't heat any oil over 400, really. If frying is not the best thing to do if you want to be serious about health.
So
fried foods are not good. We fry once in a while, but not a lot. And when we do fry, we try to fry frequently on skillets that are electric, because you can really exactly control the temperature then. Sometimes we fry on the stove, but we just don't fry that much stuff. You just want to make sure you never smoke your oil. If you smoke your oil, like I said the other night, throw it out. Wash out the pan. Get it out of there. Put new oil in. You should not smoke the oil. All right, so here's my slide right here, which tells you the data about the rate of oxidation, which I just told you off the top of my head, and I didn't wait till I got to the right slide. Okay? If you see red light coming off the stove, that is 600 degrees Fahrenheit. You are way over what you should be for heating any oil. So when you buy French fries at McDonald's, how long has that oil been hot? Do you know that for a long time, maybe it's changing now, but for a long time, the average 24-hour-a-day McDonald's, their vat for frying the French fries was 1,000 gallons of oil. That was the average size of the fryer. And guess what? They never changed the oil. It boils 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, some of the oil is getting soaked up by the potatoes and they're adding more. So I guess there is a little bit of a turnover of the oil, but if it's a 1,000-gallon tank, it's not getting changed very much. So you're really not buying French fries. Let me put it this way. You're really not buying potatoes. You're buying a packet of carcinogens, right? Don't eat commercially prepared French fries. Don't do that. If you really want a French fry for a special occasion, you shouldn't eat French fries that much anyway, because it's a fried food, right? But if you really, really are hungry for French fries, get yourself an air fryer. And you can put it in a specific temperature, and then you can do it dry, actually, or you could get one of those little spray bottles of olive oil and just put a little fine coating of oil on them and fry it with the air fryer. But I'll give you a hint on how to make them like real French fries. If you put them in there raw, they're going to turn out floppy, gooey, and they're not going to be like French fries at McDonald's. So number one, you have to pick the right potato. You want a baking potato. You know, the kind that when you open them up, they're all fluffy and white, and if you look at them closely, they look like they have little pearls. That's the kind you want. And you steam it first, parboil it, and then put it into the air fryer. And that'll make it all moist and nice inside like they are at the store. Okay? You can do it in an oven as well. An oven, you can control the temperature too. So you just have to turn them in the oven. 150 years ago, a 19th century health reformer named Ellen White said the following: "Olives may be so prepared as to be eaten with good results at every meal. The advantages sought by the use of butter may be obtained by eating of properly prepared olives. You can grind up olives and make it a spread for your bread instead of butter. You can also use olive oil. The oil in the olives relieves constipation, and for consumptives and those who have inflamed, irritated stomachs, it's better than any drug. So it can actually help inflammation of the stomach. As a food, it is better than any oil coming secondhand from animals." we just saw this from the scientific perspective, and this was already told to us 150 years ago, and there's no way she could have just made that up, because that wasn't the science of her day. When properly prepared, olives, like nuts, supply the place of butter and flesh meats. The oil, as eaten in the olive, is far preferable to animal oil or fat, as it serves as a laxative. Its use will be found beneficial to consumptives, and it is healing to an inflamed, irritated stomach. Remember, it is fat, and it is a refined product, so don't go hog wild on it if you don't want your cholesterol and other things to go up. Remember how cholesterol can go up even if you don't have cholesterol in the food? If you have trouble with cholesterol, you don't want to eat food that has cholesterol in it. But if you eat a whole bunch of fat, remember, even if it doesn't have cholesterol in it, your body has to make more cholesterol in order to deal with that fat. So your cholesterol could still go up from eating too much fat.
It sounds like she's talking about eating olives as olives.
Well, she is, but she's also talking about the oil. Because, and here, when she says the oil is eaten in the olive, that doesn't mean non-extracted. She's talking about, when you're saying as eaten in the olive, cold pressed. Cold pressed, because she says right here several places that the oil is far preferable to any animal oil. So she is talking about using the olives whole, but she's also talking about using the olive oil. And that's easily shown from other quotes where she actually asked people to take olive oil to some missionaries who were there. So obviously she wasn't ruling out the possibility of actually using the oil, the refined oil, by this statement. I read you this yesterday, Dr. Joel Furman. He says, when we look at the subset who had followed a vegetarian diet for at least half their life, it appears they lived 13 years longer. 13 years, that's a huge amount of benefit. You want to throw away 13 years? Just with this knowledge, you have the ability to live 13 years longer, and I would submit that those 13 years are going to be way better quality of life than the last 13 years of a non-vegetarian's life. When he's talking about a vegetarian here, he's talking about a total vegetarian. Because the lacto-ovo-vegetarians don't live 13 years longer. They live about 7 or 8 years longer. So there is some benefit there, but there's even greater benefit from the diet that God prescribed in the Garden of Eden. All right, so that's probably my shortest lecture to date. So we have some time for some questions, and if questions wane, I'm going to show you a few pictures, slides of various different things that I said off the top of my head on previous nights from other lectures that I want to just show you the scientific data so you can get the pictures. And if there's any specific thing that you can think of that you want me to do that for, you can go ahead and do that. But let's take a moment for some questions. Yes?
Normal or traditional cooking versus microwave?
So, a lot of people are worried about the microwave destroying nutrients in the food, and I've seen some significant, a lot of people, there's just a lot of buzz about that. It's possible that that's true. We don't use microwave, just in case it's true. And because we have a lot of patients who already think it's bad, and we just don't want to do it. I haven't seen really good scientific data to show the difference. My father-in-law was an engineer, and a professional engineer and a physicist, and worked in years in the chemical industry. So he knew all of the aspects of physics, chemistry, engineering, etc. And he maintained that it didn't really matter. When you heat something, you're exciting the molecules, period. I've seen lots of people asserting that there's massive destruction of nutrients. But like I said, I haven't seen good scientific articles for it. And I've tried to find some. So if anybody finds a really rigorous study that can show that, I'd be happy to see it, because we've already,
Even an unrigorous study.
yeah, any significant info, I haven't found good scientific data for it. And I like to support the things that I assert, either from inspiration or science, or both. Now, a microwave is very dangerous to stand by. Okay, some people think that it's going to make the food radioactive. No. There is radiation coming out of the microwave when it's running, and you don't want to stand by it, because that radiation is not good for you. It's not making the food radioactive. Those are just wavelengths that are exciting the molecules in the food to heat it. The other thing about a microwave is that most people put stuff in microwaves in plastic. That is a very bad idea. And it's not so much because of the microwave as because of the plastic. Because when you heat food in plastics, the plastic leach highly toxic, endocrine disrupting chemicals into your food. So never ever put anything in a microwave in plastic if you still choose to use microwaves. Yes, Rob?
I'm guessing that.
Can you use the mic?
Because don't they have a filter
Yes,
on them?
yes, your plates, and I'm sorry, yeah, we want to try to help get the mic to people before they talk, so that the people online can hear. The question was about some of the paper plates and stuff that have a little bit of a plastic coating. It would apply to saran wrap too. You could put stuff in a glass dish and cover the thing with saran wrap, and you still got plastic touching the food, right? So you just don't want to have plastic in a microwave. That's a very bad idea. We stopped using the microwave when we had some bottles of olive oil stored in a cupboard above the microwave. And one day we come home, and there's oil all over the place. And we're like, what on earth? And there's oil dripping down, and we open up the cupboard, and oil comes pouring out. And one of the oil bottles was literally cracked, and all the oil was leaking out. So I think the radiation cracked the bottle of oil. So that means that the radiation is probably affecting the oil as well. So you wouldn't want to probably store food close by.
Or store yourself.
Yeah. So anyway, that's just, I guess that's not very definitive, I know, but I haven't found something definitive. Let's go on to the next question. Okay, another question over here.
Michael, Michael Greger, you know who he is?
Yes.
He says there's nothing wrong with the microwave food too.
Yeah,
And I feel like he tries to find all
Right.
that kind of stuff.
right. I haven't, like I said, I haven't found any real good evidence for it, but a lot of people think it's bad, and so we're not going to use it at our retreat, because we would have patients on a regular basis that would be like, I'm not going to eat the food from the microwave. So there's just no point in us trying to use a microwave that way. Next question over there. You had it. Okay, go ahead.
When I was 17, I was diagnosed with low blood sugar,
Mm-hmm.
and they told me to eat mini meals and meat and cheese.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did research that didn't make sense to me. I did research, and if you eat foods that activate your pancreas to make more insulin, it made more sense to me that if you don't eat, your pancreas won't activate. So when I felt bad, I just didn't eat, or I cut way back. But I didn't learn how to take care of it until a few years ago when we had a reversing diabetes
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
class.
Yeah, those types of foods would actually stimulate your body to make more insulin. But the problem with that is that doesn't mean that's going to help your blood sugar, because the body isn't functioning with that insulin. The body is madly trying to make more insulin, but that insulin isn't being effective at getting the sugar into the cells. And so it wouldn't help to try to stimulate your body to make more insulin by eating those kinds of foods, because the fact is that those same kinds of foods are making it so that the insulin doesn't work.
But it is true to treat it the same as a diabetic.
Well, they were trying to turn you insulin resistant with what they were telling
Yeah.
you, so,
Yeah, that was basically
yeah.
turning you insulin resistant.
Yeah, because it said after so many years it would flip.
Yeah, that makes me remember a point that I wanted to make about diabetes, and that is type 2 diabetics can become type 1 diabetics over time. If they eat enough, if they're continually forcing their body to try to make more insulin to bring the sugars down, it wears the pancreas out. And then they add metformin on top of it, glyburide, the sulfonylureas, and those drugs actually start killing off the pancreas. And so they will actually turn you type 1 diabetic eventually too. So you really don't want to do that. And so the drugs are treating the symptoms, not the underlying cause. It's much better to treat the underlying cause.
So this kind of goes along with that. I'm a little confused on one part because we're saying don't eat fat, which I do understand that about the, the keys in the door. So then how much or how little, like avocados, or I don't have oil in the house, I talked to you
Yeah.
about that.
Right.
But how much avocado or walnuts, I mean, is that a once a week thing? Is that, can you do that daily without being, how does that work?
You need fat in the diet, and I'm not at all trying to say that you shouldn't eat any fat. So most of the problems with diabetes comes from the animal fats. So when you go to plant fats, you don't want to overdo them, but eating some avocado almost every day or eating nuts every day has been scientifically shown to have a lot of benefits.
And that won't cause heart issues then?
No, it's not. It doesn't. The plant fats don't do the same things as the animal fats.
I just
Go
wanted
ahead.
to say, Martin had a relative that worked at some health retreat that has since Lifestyle Centers of America. And he was telling us, of course, this is what he was telling us, that they were actually reversing diabetes with a 30% vegetarian diet.
30% fat.
So 30% fat, thank you, diet. So in other words, it was they were eliminating the animal, and they were giving a 30. I don't know why they were doing that, other than it was just kind of like, I guess they were
That's
doing an experiment.
That's a pretty good amount of fat, by the way.
Yeah, so that's like your average, and he was just ecstatic. He was like, they actually reversed diabetes on a 30% fat diet if it was a plant fat.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure it wasn't hydrogenated and that sort of thing. So that's just like, what we heard that they were doing, and I thought that was interesting because it's kind of, I think we're doing a similar thing. I don't think we have a 30% fat diet, but we just don't really worry about it.
Yeah.
Other than we're not pouring fat in there.
It's hard to tell people. See, I don't like to give specific numbers, like you can eat 1 avocado per week or something like that. But it is hard to transmit sometimes the idea of moderation when you're telling somebody that the food it's a good food to eat. I try to emphasize to people that if they eat a whole pile of too much nuts or too much olive oil, that it can be not good. But if you're eating some olive oil every day, or some avocados every day, or some nuts every day, that's not a problem. What I see often happen is people learn that, butter's bad, almond butter is good, and so they'll put more almond butter on than bread. You know what I'm saying? And I have a hard time not saying something. I usually don't, because I do like people to try to self-regulate. I don't want everything to be like down to you have to measure this or I also don't want it to be that I'm the criteria for what people do, but I think we have to just try to use our brains a little bit. You don't want to put more almond butter on your bread or peanut butter than you have bread. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, we'll have people when we show them we have an olive oil that we serve at almost every meal that we put all kinds of spices in at the health retreat. Not really spices, but herbs. And we use it, but people will literally, some people will be like dumping it on multiple spoons so that at the end there's a puddle of oil on their plate that, I mean, you could almost want to put it back into the jar if it wasn't contaminated so much.
That is a good thing to teach, moderation.
Yeah.
because That's part of the problem.
That's right.
Part of the problem with the. That would be a good thing to teach though, because moderation, that's part of a problem with the diabetic. We're starving.
Yes.
We're starving. So when you sit at the table, you're like, I want to eat. And it's like your brain is kind of that addiction thing, which I
Yeah.
missed that. Maybe
Yeah.
you talked about it, but I'm ready to tear the cupboards apart when my sugars,
Yeah.
well,
yeah.
and I don't think, I just do it.
Right.
I just eat.
Well, and I do teach it. I'm not saying I don't teach it. It's just that I try not to specify exactly all these little tiny details. So one thing I should mention that can help diabetics a lot, and it can also help people who feel like they have low blood sugars. It can help some people even, I think it'll help people with actual low blood sugars, but I've also seen it to help people. There's a number of times when we've had people who have said, I always get low blood sugar, and I just can't wait that long. And so we test their blood sugar. And more often than not, they don't have low blood sugar. So I think that they're having actually an issue with their sugar getting into the cells, even though their sugar is not low. So we like to educate the people. Some people really do have a low blood sugar, and that's one thing. But when they feel like they have a low blood sugar and they don't have a low blood sugar, that's another thing. And so one of the things that's critical, a trace element that's critical for utilization of blood glucose is chromium. Chromium, and I think I got into some kind of toxin at one point. And I all of a sudden had a bunch of issues going on, and I started trying to figure some things out. And one of the things that started happening to me is that I was famished at weird times of the day, like in the middle of the night, and times when I ordinarily would have never been hungry. And I was just like, and I really felt like I had this low blood pressure sugar. And I would test the low blood sugar, and it wasn't low. And so I started taking chromium, and that fixed it. And I've had a number of people where that's fixed it too. Magnesium is also necessary for sugar to get into the cells. So repleting chromium and magnesium is an important thing. Go ahead.
This comes from somebody watching online. She's asking specifically, does microwave cause cancer? That was the question.
It could contribute to cancer if you're standing by it, yes. Like I said, I don't have any evidence that it's going to contribute to cancer scientifically by eating food that's heated in there. But the radiation, it is radiation that's coming off it when it's, and they're called microwaves. That's why it's called a microwave. We call it a microwave, but it's actually a microwave radiation, which is a specific wavelength of radiation that is very damaging to living cells, and it penetrates through stuff. It penetrates, if you put a piece of meat in the microwave, it penetrates the meat, right? It starts to heat it from the center out. So that's going to do the same thing to you. It's going to start cooking your insides. So don't stand by a microwave when it's on. The amount of radiation is inversely proportional to the square of the distance. Okay, so what that means is if you double the distance between you and the microwave, you have quadrupled. That's the inverse square of 2. If you 4 times your distance to the microwave, you have gone 16 times less radiation. Okay? So it drops off quickly as you move away. Yes?
Okay, I have a question about cashews, since they're not really technically speaking, I guess, a nut. They're a seed of a plant, right?
Yeah, they do grow on a tree like a nut tree, but they're not quite in the same kind of a
Yeah.
shell like a standard nut. They are a unique nut.
Yeah, are they, like there are some seeds like apples and
Yeah.
pears that are poisonous. Is there anything about cashews?
Cashews are very good for food. They are excellent. Cashews are the lowest fat nut that there is.
Okay.
A lot of nuts are up toward the 80s to 90% of fat, which is a fair amount of fat. It doesn't mean you don't eat nuts. It's a good fat. But just don't go hog wild and eating everything with nuts.
Right.
Now, on our website, there's lots of recipes that use nuts for gravies and all kinds of things. You can make amazing things. So that would be where you could end up eating a very large amount of nuts if you're going hog wild on all that stuff. But we have nuts every day. We eat nuts every day. And we serve nuts at the retreat every day. But cashews are somewhere around, I think, 76% fat or something like that. So they're a lot lower fat nut than many other nuts. Macadamia is the highest.
When you talked about heart attacks, I was interested. Those fatal heart attacks that happen without a warning, what exactly happens?
Okay, before I answer that, let me say one more thing about cashews. So cashews, the seed pod of the cashew does contain a natural occurring toxin, and in the harvesting process, that often gets on the nut. When you buy nuts from Costco that are already roasted or something like that, they've already washed them and gotten that off. But sometimes when you buy bulk cashews, they won't have washed them properly. And they have a very strange taste. And some people can't taste it, and I can taste it, and it's terrible tasting. And so you want to wash bulk raw cashews very well to get that substance off the outside, and then they should be fine. Going back to your question about the heart attack, what's happening is a plaque that is usually about 50% occluded on the vessel and has a soft lipid core ruptures. Probably usually ruptures because of high blood pressure. So the pressure just goes high, and all of a sudden that plaque doesn't stick there anymore. It blows open. The inside fatty core spills into the bloodstream. When that hits the bloodstream, the blood goes just like that. Even makes that sound. It clots, in other words. It clots. And so it occludes the blood vessel suddenly. And those are the ones that just stop massive amount of blood flow to the heart very suddenly, and that's usually what causes the sudden death. Whereas the slowly clogging vessels that are 90% closed that give you the chest pain, those aren't as likely to kill you. I mean, they're killing you slowly. That's not good for you because you're not getting proper oxygenation to your tissues or sugar to the tissues, but you're not as likely to die suddenly with that one. You get the symptom first. Yes?
Yeah, I had high sugar levels in my body. I need to cut down on my sweets. The doctor says you got to just quit eating sugar. Don't use sugar for anything. So I was wanting to find something that I could use in place of sugar for cooking. I used to put cane sugar on top of my cereal, make it sweet. I quit using sugar in a lot of not everything. I use honey and also use maple syrup.
Yes, those are good substitutes.
Okay, thank you.
Don't go with fake sugars.
Yeah.
Honey or maple syrup are probably some of the better ones to use. They're still sugar.
Yeah.
So you still want to be moderate. But remember, your main issue with the blood sugar is not the sugars, but the fats. That doesn't mean you want to go hog wild on sugars, But you want to be really looking at the fat issue and try to find ways of reducing the fat. That's going to help with the overall sugar. Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Was there another question? Okay, I'm going to show a couple of slides here. This is one, I told you about sucralose, and I told you that it was originally created as an insecticide. And the thing that I forgot to tell you, which I wanted to tell you, is that it is an organochloride. Organochlorides are highly toxic and include things such as PCBs, dioxin, mustard gas, chloroform, aldrin, dieldrin, and DDT. Without fail, all organochlorides are either chemical warfare agents, pesticides, or herbicides. You don't want to eat it. There has never in history been an organochloride that has been approved for human consumption until sucralose. It's not food. This one makes me mad, especially the fact that they put in, they sell it to diabetics. They market it to diabetics. And they say it tastes like sugar. Yeah, that's because it's made from sugar. It's 99% sugar, and they're trying to sell it to a diabetic. And they think that they're somehow benefiting themselves when all they're doing is putting money in the pocketbook, because the sucralose is only a toxin. It's not going to do anything good for you. It's not going to help your blood sugar or anything. You're still getting primarily sugar, but it's patented. So you're paying the company a premium to put essentially an organochloride insecticide in your food. They are literally legally allowed in food labeling laws to call it sugar-free if the serving size is less than 0.5 grams of sugar, and calorie-free if the serving size is less than 5 calories. You know what the Bible, you know what God calls that? Lying. Lying. All right, that's one slide I wanted to show you. Aspartame is in the same category. I touched on it a little bit with excitotoxins, but I usually don't put a lot in the excitotoxin lecture because I have a whole lecture on sugar substitutes, which I don't have time to give you. But aspartame is seriously dangerous. Well, let me show you the slide for aspartame since we're here. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically 10% of aspartame is absorbed into the bloodstream as its breakdown product, which is methanol, which is wood alcohol. Does anybody know what wood alcohol does? It makes you blind, causes blindness. So methanol then converts into formaldehyde. This might be why people have had a lot of vision problems while on diet sodas. Apparently, for a while, there was a website dedicated for, I don't know if it's still there, dedicated for professional pilots, commercial pilots. Hopefully, they're all professional. Commercial pilots who would be able to report their experience with going blind while flying your jet and drinking a diet soda. It was a temporary blindness. But as you can imagine, that could be problematic. Apparently, there was something about the altitude and the diet soda at the same time that made it a little bit worse. There was one story of a guy who was driving down the freeway, and suddenly his vision flipped upside down while he was driving. He pulled over to the side of the road, which might not be that easy, as you can imagine, because if you're upside down, everything's backwards, and called the ambulance. He ended up in the emergency room, and he had a pretty switched on doctor because the doctor did an evaluation, and he said, "Have you been drinking diet soda?" And he said, "Yeah, I was drinking it as I was driving." And he said, "Well, we're going to just observe you for a couple of hours because I think you have aspartame poisoning." Well, a couple of hours, his vision flipped back right side up. Presumably, he doesn't drink diet sodas anymore. I didn't find that out for sure, but you would think, right? Don't drink and drive. Yeah, well, you don't want to drink something that's going to turn your vision upside down. I can guarantee you that. All right. I wanted to show you a couple slides on vinegar. I mentioned that a little bit the other day. And I really would like you to see this whole lecture. Wine in the Bible. Here's actually the direct link to it, okay? I told you to find it on my website, but this is the exact link. Wine in the Bible. Watch that presentation. I really would like you to see it. Then, oops, did somebody miss it? Did you miss it? Okay, go ahead, sorry. Okay, so I mentioned, well, first of all, we know as Christians, Jesus is our example in all things. Is that right? He should be. And you know what the Bible says? The Bible says they gave him vinegar to drink mingled with gall, and when he tasted thereof, he would not drink. So as our example, Jesus refused vinegar also. I mentioned that vinegar is the end product of the fermentation cycle. I mentioned to you that alcohol still remains, and here you see some of your apple cider vinegars and the amounts of alcohol still remaining. And this is also some of the quotes which I found that say that alcohol reacts with acetic acid, a process called esterification that forms ethyl acetate to form flavor and aroma compounds to make the vinegar taste less sharp and have a better flavor. They intentionally, this is a wine vinegar manufacturing site. They're telling you how to do it. They intentionally leave the alcohol in there to make it taste better and probably to make it more addictive. Federal law, any fermentation process is going to create vinegar. Pickling. So if you're pickling in a standard traditional manner, you are creating vinegar. Your standard store-bought pickles, they're usually they don't have time to let it ferment. So they just put the cucumbers in and they pour the vinegar in and then can it that way. And it tastes like they pickled it. But a traditional pickling method would be to pickle the cucumbers like you would sauerkraut. And you let it ferment. And fermentation process makes vinegar. So anytime you have something pickled, it's going to have its own vinegar in it, even if they didn't add vinegar. So that is not a good plan, not a healthy thing to do. So how do you make a pickle? We make the most amazing pickles at the health retreat that you've ever tasted. I used to hate pickles, and I think it was because of the vinegar flavor. So they started making these lemon-based pickles, and I thought, I ought to get over my prejudice and try one of these sometime. So I tried one of their pickles, and I was like, wow. So I now eat pickles, but I eat lemon pickles. So you can get a recipe from us. I think it's on our website. For a lemon juice pickle. And yeah, it's more work because you can't just buy it from the store. But all pickles have excitotoxins in them too, besides the fact that they have vinegar in them. I don't think I've ever seen a store-bought pickle that doesn't have excitotoxins in it. So the federal law designates anything that is more than 0.5% alcohol as an alcoholic drink. That means kombucha manufacturers actually have received federal warnings because their alcohol levels have been up to 3.8%. That is as much as a light beer. And vinegar can be up to 2% alcohol by volume. That's 4 times the federally allowed limit for considering it an alcoholic beverage. Well, 150 years ago, a 19th century health reformer named Ellen White said the following: "The salads are prepared with oil and vinegar. Fermentation takes place in the stomach. The food does not digest, but decays or putrefies. As a consequence, the blood is not nourished. It becomes filled with impurities, and liver and kidney difficulties appear. And I can show you scientific articles, which I don't have time to right now, that show that this is what happens when you take vinegar. Liver and kidney problems. It also paralyzes the gut. It paralyzes the gut, which is one of the reasons why fermentation takes place. As a consequence, the blood is not nourished but becomes filled with impurities, and liver and kidney difficulties appear. Heart disturbances, inflammation, and many evils are the result of such kind treatment. And not only are the bodies affected, but morals and religious life are affected. And I'm going to address that a little bit more in just a second. But first, I'm going to show you some more of the science. Here is excitotoxins and alcoholic cravings. I showed you this when we were talking about excitotoxins. This shows how excitotoxins are the thing that trigger people to go back to alcohol. Glutamate, specifically. And here you see that these are the free amino acids in vinegar. Because when you ferment something, the fermentation process breaks up the proteins into individual free amino acids. That's the definition of an excitotoxin, free amino acids. So here's what they say in this scientific article, Journal of Function Foods. By comparing the data of amino acids in different types of vinegars, glutamic acid is the highest and is present in both grain and fruit vinegars. That means apple cider vinegar. Total concentrations of amino acids increased with aging time. And that's a very interesting article because they actually outline the levels of these free amino acids that are in the vinegar. That's why vinegar is addictive. So Ellen White actually had an addiction to vinegar at one point in her life. Maybe you don't know this. She talked about that, and she talked about how the Lord gave her victory over this. She said, I had indulged the desire for vinegar, but I resolved with the help of God to overcome this appetite. I fought the temptation, determined not to be mastered by this habit. I continued to resist the desire for vinegar, and at last I conquered. Now I have no inclination to taste anything of this kind. This experience has been of great value to me in many ways. I obtained a complete victory. Praise the Lord. You can all obtain the same complete victory. Listen to this next statement, though. This is very serious. Notice what she says. As long as you acknowledge this habit by indulging it, Satan will retain his hold on your will and bring it into obedience to himself. It's just like an alcohol habit. It is an alcohol habit. It's got alcohol in it. But if you will be determined to overcome, the Lord will heal you. He will give you strength to resist every temptation. Ever remember Christ as your Savior and Keeper. So I wanted to show you some of that additional data there because I said it off the top of my head the other day, and I like to give you the references so you can go and look them up if you'd like to. Yes?
I've said it all along. I've said it for years and decades, for a long time, and I'll share it with you and the rest of the bunch. There's a word I've invented that will help you stop smoking, drinking, hard drugs. It don't matter. It's gotta wanna. If you don't gotta wanna do it. Mm-hmm. But you gotta have good.
Yeah. That's a good point.
You gotta have the guy upstairs. You gotta have the Lord helping you out a lot.
Right.
But if you really, really, really want to quit, it don't matter how long you've been smoking, how long you've been drinking.
Yep.
No what, hard drugs, whatever problem you have. If you really, really, really want to, you gotta want to
Yep.
quit. You gotta want to quit.
That's right. And
No
God-
matter, you don't take these drugs they send you. Oh, take this 3 times a day. Mm-hmm. No, you don't need any of that stuff.
Yeah.
You gotta have it. You gotta have it here.
When
in
you
your heart.
submit your will to God, He's going to give you the strength.
Amen.
He's waiting for you to do that. And that is
Exactly.
the main reason why most people aren't successful at coming off those things, is because they really don't want to quit. They really don't want to quit. Yes?
What about blackstrap? Because I know it's a drug.
Let's get you on the mic here.
What about blackstrap molasses? Because I know it's the drudge of something I don't remember.
Blackstrap molasses is is a precursor to sugar when you've started from the beets or the sugar cane and it's not fully processed. So it's a less processed form, and it's got good nutrients in it, including, it's still sugar, but it's got quite a bit of iron in it. And so sometimes people who are low in iron can use that as a supplement for iron. Yes, you want it to be organic. So I didn't give you my genetically modified lecture. Most people don't really know too much about that. It's becoming more known, but that's a very serious health problem. And it's not the same as hybridization. And almost all sugar beets in this country are genetically modified. So if any ingredient list, if you want to avoid GMOs, if any ingredient list says sugar, don't buy it. It has to say cane sugar. Because if it just says sugar, it is beet sugar, and it is therefore genetically modified. Cane sugar is not yet genetically modified, as far as I know. You want your sugar, any sugar that you do get, to be organic, because they are using Roundup to kill the sugarcane fields before harvest, like they are using with beans. Beans and some of the grains, yes. So your beans should always be certified organic to try to avoid as much as possible exposure to Roundup. So should any product that is mostly genetically modified, like corn, soybeans. Canola is 99% genetically modified. Don't ever eat canola oil. It's not a good oil for you anyway, even if it wasn't genetically modified. So yeah, if you want to be serious about avoiding GMOs, stay away from anything that says just sugar, because that's beet sugar. So the reason why I said that is because of the molasses. So you'd want organic molasses to hopefully avoid an issue of it being genetically modified. Yeah. Go ahead, Robin.
I actually think that might answer my question, because so many blackstrap molasses on the side says causes reproductive harm, and it'll say that right on the side.
Mm-hmm.
But I've not compared that to an organic one. I always wondered why it says that.
Yeah.
It'll say, on the state of California.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be because of the Roundup. All right, well, sounds like we've exhausted the questions, and we're done a little bit earlier than we are usually, so that's good.
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
This is not food, but I had a friend who used that, I think it was black cohash for a poultice,
Yes.
and she thought it would help with her cancer. It created a big hole in her body, but
Okay, that's not black cohosh. There is some benefits from black, I don't think. I think it's bloodroot, probably.
Yeah.
Black
salve. Maybe that she used
Yeah.
cohosh, but it's usually like bloodroot.
Black salve is bloodroot.
Yeah, and I've had some patients who do that, and they're all excited because they say, "Oh, look, it's pulling out the cancer," but what it's actually doing is it's killing your skin. It's creating something called an eschar, which is just like turning your skin into leather. Then when they pull that out, they're pulling a chunk of skin or meat or flesh or something with it. And I just figure, I mean, if somebody wants to do surgery that way, I mean, it's, go for it. I mean, actually, don't go for it. But it's probably easier to do a clean surgery with a scalpel. The ladies that I have known that have done that, like I had one lady who did that for breast cancer, and it just knocked the top off. And she said she was in so much pain that she said she would never have gone to the place where she went to get that done, because that's what they specialized in. It was, I mean, she had to go on all sorts of narcotics, and it was extremely painful. And then she ended up, the cancer just progressed.
Yeah.
So there may be, I mean, like if you've got something and you want to put something on your arm, I would not do it on your face. because you don't know what if the cancer is, there does seem to be some things that they do, like certain things that have like eggplant derivatives and stuff, and they're using them as pharmaceuticals as well. Things that will actually kill, like, what is it, FU, that sounds terrible, it's anyways, there's some kind of, I can't think of the name, but anyways, that you put on the cancer on your head or whatever, and it kills it. And so there are some herbal things that they do that way. And so if you put that on your face and you don't know how big that cancer is, I mean, people can end up with huge caverns on their face, and then they're getting plastic surgery, and yeah.
Yeah, I think there's probably better ways of trying to address cancer than that. Here's another slide that I wanted to show you. This was the biopsy, skin biopsy of the normal density of nerve fibers in skin. And then this is the person who has gotten a skin sample from after using capsaicin, which is the thing that makes pepper hot. Topically, notice all the nerve cells are gone, completely vaporized. So they were using, this would be, in this case it was cayenne pepper, for a topical pain relief, and I just don't see how vaporizing your nerves is the best way to deal with pain. And if this is what this does to your skin on the outside of your body, imagine what it's doing to the nerves of your gut. It's no wonder the scientific, here is the case report. I told you this one off the top of my head. This is the case report of a kid, well, young man, 25-year-old male, giving himself a heart attack by taking cayenne pepper pills. So I know that lots of health reformers say that you need to keep cayenne pepper around in case of emergency for a heart attack. Don't do it. It could actually cause the vessels to spasm instead of dilate. The much more safer way to give somebody something for a heart attack in an emergency would be to give them magnesium, especially magnesium chloride. There's good science that's published that shows that giving magnesium right after a heart attack dramatically decreases the death rate. So magnesium is the thing to give, not cayenne pepper. And here is the article that shows that the oral cecal transit time is significantly increased by 45% by red hot pepper. This would be like cayenne pepper. 45% increased transit time. If the transit time increased, what does that mean? What did it do to the speed? It slowed it down because it's now taking longer to get through. That means it's paralyzing the gut. And of course it's paralyzing the gut because it's vaporizing the nerves. And it's not just black pepper that does that. Notice that the red pepper did it worse than the black pepper. So cayenne pepper, I do not consider a health food. If you want to make a Mexican flavored food, you can buy some, this is what we do at the retreat, mild California chilies. Or they sometimes call them New Mexico chilies. There's another name that I just bought them under. It's basically the same thing, same species. I forget the name right now, but it gives you that Mexican food flavor. There's a slight tanginess. It's not even as hot as a garlic. So it's very, very mild in comparison to a cayenne pepper. That's what you can use. And Saya just made us some enchiladas the other day, which were fabulous. And we had
Black pepper all my life.
Yes.
He's giving you the mic to speak.
There's lots of things that we've done in this society all our lives that are not healthy for us. So pepper is one of those things that's just, it's killing the nerve cells. The capsaicin is the thing that vaporizes the nerves. This is capsaicin. So capsaicin is the thing that makes every pepper hot, every hot pepper hot. So it's not ideal. Not ideal for digestion. especially if you have constipation. I mean, that would be a good place to start. All right, that's good. I think, one more question. Okay, this is from online. Good, I'm
Another
glad we
online
get
question.
these questions from online.
Somebody online's asking if taking vinegar can help you lose belly fat.
I would not do that, no.
I agree.
There might be some research somewhere that tells you that that's going to help you lose belly fat, but it's, yeah, the problem is actually, we saw the scientific article the other night that alcohol reduces your ability to burn fat, and vinegar contains alcohol. So, yeah, I would definitely not try to lose weight with vinegar. Because even if it did help you lose weight, it's going to cause havoc in all kinds of other areas, including basically making your food decay instead of digest. And that means you're going to be malnourished. All right, we had a good smattering of questions to end our health program with here together, and we're so thankful that you joined us. And we really are going to be keeping you in prayer, because we know that some of the things we've told you to do might be simple, but they're not easy. So you're going to have a challenge. You're going to be fighting against appetite. You might be fighting against other family members' opinions or tastes and appetites. And you're going to be fighting against old habits. So you need the Lord's help. And so I'm going to pray right now. And I'd like you to once more commit your diet and everything you are and everything you put in your body to the Lord by standing with me right now. And I'm going to pray for the Lord to give special strength and wisdom and victory in your life. Holy Father, we thank you so much for the amazing way in which you have created our bodies, fearfully and wonderfully made, and all the evidence and information that you've given us because you love us and you want to keep us healthy. We ask forgiveness where we have been ignorant or where we have intentionally ignored this information. We pray that you would give us the strength and victory. Each person right here tonight, I ask, and those that are listening online, please send your Spirit to be with them, to overshadow them, to give them victory and strength and courage and determination to push forward. And then I ask that you would bless each step of faith in an amazing way, magnify the effects beyond their belief so that they can see the evidence of you working in their lives as they bring their lives more in harmony with your will and the laws that you've put in our being. As we go apart from one another, I pray that we would each be kept faithful until your soon coming, that we might meet again, if not on this earth, in heaven where there is no more sickness, sorrow, or death. And we thank you for hearing and answering this prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. God be with you.
All right, please have a seat. Well, we are so blessed. How many of you are blessed? Can you raise your hands? Wow, everyone is blessed. I don't know about, yeah, I am. We have been having good discussion at home with my wife, with our kids, so we are very thankful. How many of you would like to have the whole team come again maybe next year, maybe? Yeah? 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 All right, okay. All right. So what we would like to do, we would like to give something. It's a love gift from our churches. So if it's okay, maybe both you and your wife can come, yeah? So we have a card. I know you have a lot of cards that you have received throughout the year, but we would like to have you put somewhere so that will be a reminder.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. God bless you.
Yes.
We appreciate your ministry here and working with you on this project. Yeah.
Thank you to Fred and Seya for connecting all of us with them. So, and also to all the donors and everyone that has been helping, we want to say thank you. All right. So if you have any questions, both of them will be around here for a little bit tonight.
Yeah, we'll be downstairs.
Downstairs, okay.
I did want to make this announcement. We have a few books left. So if you were almost wishing to buy a book, We might be tempted to give you a discount tonight because it'd be better than carrying them back in our luggage. So.
All right, so let's go downstairs for
All
more.
right. Yes.
All right.